cash. One is what is in the books, which is saying, okay, this is your money that needs to come in. The second part is, please, even if it requires a small investment of somebody looking at that, because as a founder, you cannot be chasing every debtor for a recovery, right? But at some point, cash is fuel for your business.
So let's start with, how did you identify business opportunities and evaluate their potential when starting out? And of course, we want to hear more also about the story behind your latest venture, which is House This. So over to you, Shikha.
I'll quickly tell you, I think, so I've in total now been an entrepreneur for now, I think almost 13 years, 13 to 14 years. So it's been 3 ventures, 2 of which I mentioned, and Indira, you did as well. So one was a manufacturing business in the home and lifestyle space, and then I started the home decor brand called House This. I think the first business that I started was very gut based because, I was working with Unilever. I had just finished my MBA, and this was when organized retail was just coming up. So this was in the early 2000, 10, 11 phase. And I think the category just excited me. As I'm sure maybe, many of you may be operating in the consumer space, it's just a buzzing, space to be in. And of course, that time brands were just taking shape and retailers were just setting shop. So when I was working with Unilever, because they're an FMCG brand, I used to travel, through my sales stint and go here and there. And I just found the space extremely exciting. And the second part I noticed was that there was no good the supply chain was not developed, right? People had not developed great high quality products to be able to service the retail channel that was emerging. And because I saw that gap, I felt that, this makes sense. So it was a more gut based decision, which I know business tends to be. So there's no harm in that. I think the second venture was definitely a more calculated decision because when I ran the business for 4 years, fortunately it was profitable, completely bootstrapped. I realized that there is a third part to it which I had missed out. So one is the market, one is what I love doing, yes, but there is also a customer. And I noticed that there was a very big gap of good quality, functional, well-priced, products under I would say a cohesive brand in the home category, and nobody was giving them. There was either very high-end players or very mass, like who were supplying to hypermarkets, but the mid space was very unoccupied. So I think there my decision was basically based on number one, again, what was the customer pain point? They were not getting high quality products in that space. Number two, the market, was it ready for it? Was the opportunity large? Yes, it was. And third was to understand really what was my own personal passion. Because I feel that when you run a business, many times nobody tells you this enough, that you have to be passionate about what you're running. I tell people, don't just run after business simply because it's the latest fad or there's a gap. You have to really be able to resonate with that space. So I think it's a combination of your own personal ethos, the market, and the customer. This is how I have made decisions so far. And very quickly about House This, like you mentioned, it's a home and lifestyle brand. It's a digital first brand where it, a significant online and offline presence. And the story behind it is we say that we are not just selling bed sheets and cushions. We are selling products that are much more than just the fabric they sell, right? So every product is inspired by a story from India. Our team actually goes to every location, studies the market, studies the way consumers live, and then we create a product which is very suited to contemporary India. So that's really, in a very nutshell, what we do and what the story about the brand is. This is how my journey with it has come, from those many years to where it is now.
But I want to backtrack to, you mentioned, having bootstrapped your business. And of course, from jumping from venture to venture, I think what I'm very interested to understand is what were your financial strategies, that you used to manage the transition from one venture to the other. And, did your previous ventures influence how you financed House This?
So, my journey is, as I say, proudly bootstrapped. And I would say that to any entrepreneur that it is, that's the way business has always been done. Now in the ecosystem, we have VC funding and we have equity and all of that talk. But I have somehow, through all my ventures, been using either internal funds, which is that's personal capital, or I have sort of looked at instruments outside. So I'll tell you how I look at financing when I think about a business, right? One is your setup capital. So when you start a business, which typically tends to be mostly either personal, investments or friends and family, right? Which is the way most entrepreneurs start. The second is what I call working capital. So let's say you start the business, you see traction. Now you want to, you want to grow your sales by 2x and you need to create stock. Like I'm a product business, right? So I need to do that. So here I've used, and it's been great the way the ecosystem is developed, because initially the only option was to go to banks, right? And banks don't often offer money initial stages when you're not, say, not profitable. But in the last 3-4 years, I think the first 3-4 years I only had to use personal capital, internal accruals, whatever profits I was making, I would put aside a certain amount and reinvest it in the business after looking at whatever personal considerations I had to, in terms of a salary that I paid out to myself. But I think good instruments that tend to come in are, when you maintain a strong payment cycle with your vendors, when you develop a good credit history, the bank does start offering you small ticket size loans. So I access that. What's been great in the market is a lot of NBFCs have come now, which offer invoice financing. So that has been a good tool, which I have used with different levels of success. And of course, apart from that, this is all working capital. So when mismatches, happen, you're not getting enough money from the market, or you have to pay, upfront, let's say, to a vendor. The third is what I call growth capital, right? This is the way I see financing for a business. So there's setup capital, there is working capital, and there is growth. I highly encourage people that for growth capital, that's when the VC or the angel investor should come. And the angel investor can also come early. And in fact, currently I am possibly looking at now pushing the pedal on the business and accessing, external funds. But as you can see, for various reasons, it has come after a very long period of time for me, because I felt that whatever my personal ambition was or how the market was developing, I was being able to support it through internal funds. So that's the way I've kind of financed the business so far. I think the second part of your question, and I don't know how many entrepreneurs here have maybe started multiple ventures, but I really, really wanted to answer this. And I'm so glad, Indira, you put this, because I don't think it's talked about enough. How do you move from one venture to the other? It's been very interesting, because I think I did a terrible job in the first case when I moved from the first to the second. The reason was, as an entrepreneur, you want to just launch your idea, right? You're full of excitement. You want to get to the next step. So after the manufacturing business, I said, okay, let's now establish the brand, right? But I would highly recommend that if anybody moves from one entity to the other, one venture to the other, please, keep a lot of certain things in mind, which I have learned from the hard way. One is, getting your books settled, ensuring your agreements have all been signed up and closed, making sure you pull out your capital, because probably that's the money you're going to put into the next business, right? And I made several big mistakes there, which is why a lot of auditing issues, things started cropping up. So this is a very boring side of business. I mean, finance is sometimes, things you feel you have to do, not good to do, but actually it's very, very important. So, making sure that your receivables are all settled, making sure, otherwise these things come back to haunt you. So I don't know if that's really what you were looking at, Indira, but I feel that, making sure your reconciliations are done, getting all your legal formalities complete, so that then when you start in your new venture, you start with the right paid up capital, you make an informed decision. Otherwise, you don't want the past to be kind of carrying forward. And when you run multiple businesses, you need to settle one business before you move to the next. So I don't know if this is what you were getting at, but I felt that it was a very pertinent question you asked.
Just a very quick follow up on that is, what was, say, a big learning from this experience of how you shifted or pivoted to house this? Any big learning in the financial strategies that you used, or the approach that you took to financing your business? Anything you would change, or any big learning from that?
Two learnings I have is that every business, number one is your, again, a very mundane day on day thing, but reconciling your accounts every month, closing your business every month, watching your numbers every month, having an MIS that tells you what is your gross margins, what is your amount of stock that you're carrying. Again, I'm saying it more from the lens of a product business. Please excuse anybody who's doing a service business. This may be obviously differently done, but as a consumer brand, inventory is a huge part of the cost you carry, right? So I think having your eye on the ball every month, if not weekly, because that can sometimes be maybe challenging from a time or a bandwidth point of view, is very important for any business, right? And coming back to cash flow, I think in India, there are two parts to cash flow, I would say. One is the numbers, right? Telling yourself week on week, how much are you getting? How much are you paying to your vendors, right? How much, what are your salaries? What are your overheads? But I think in India, we have a slightly peculiar problem, which is also the recovery part. Unfortunately, I have had some very, very tough experiences with people not paying in time, people, paying way beyond the credit period, right? And I think somewhere I didn't realize it. I just thought people would pay me, right? If it's written in the agreement 30 days, I'm like, okay, it'll be done 30 ka 40 ho jayega. It should not go beyond that. Now I've realized it's very different how things work, right? I mean, you have to have a system of follow up. You have to make sure that you have your eye on the ball. So I would say when it comes to cash, one is what is in the books, which is saying, okay, this is your money that needs to come in. The second part is, please, even if it requires a small investment of somebody looking at that, because as a founder, you cannot be chasing every debtor for a recovery, right? But at some point, cash is fuel for your business. So please invest the time to at least have somebody as a junior person also just looking at recoveries all the time. Because I don't know what experience has been from other entrepreneurs, but I've had some very, very challenging situations there. And in fact, I'm going to cover that when we talk about online, offline. But this is one tip I would really, really highly recommend, because as a founder, your focus has to be on the business, right? You can't be spreading yourself so thin. So this is just one thing I wanted to put out there to everybody here.
So in your bio, in your sort of brief, you did mention that you draw inspiration from the life and work of Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop. And this is a brand that quickly became a household name in the world of beauty and skincare. So want to hear from you. Can you speak to how she influenced your decision making or your approach to your business?
In a consumer brand, I think you have to operate from a place where you are satisfying an emotional need of a customer, right? Otherwise, customers are not going to stay or stick with you. I think and I don't know, maybe if everyone has followed her work, but just have a look if it thinks it interests you. It's Anita Roddick. She's the founder of this beauty and cosmetics brand called Body Shop. What I loved about what she created was two or three things. One, her product was very differentiated, which I think is the basic we all need to do as consumer brands, right? The product has to have a USP. See, she did this like 30, 40 years back in the UK, right? And of course, the retail market that developed much before it did in India. But she said, I'm in beauty. She created products which were talking about sourcing, ethically, looking at ingredients from the world over, using natural ingredients. So she was very ahead of her time. And like I said, this is a space like beauty where everything is about looking good, right? But she still created a product which had a clear USP while ensuring that it gives the benefits it needs to the customer. The second part that I absolutely love, and I don't think I've done it as well as I'd like in the brand, is that she's been able to make her marketing and her business ethos so much more about just profits, right? If you look at the Body Shop's advertising, it is a lot about campaigning. It is a lot about activism. She actually uses her marketing is not so much, I will send out flyers and leaflets. It's more about, involving her team in cause-based marketing. And I think that's phenomenal because you're actually being able to create ground up impact. And the third thing is she looked at finances as not just profits, right? She said profit is very important for the business, but you have to look at the impact on the community. And I think, today, at least with How's This, we have a lot of women on our team. We have a lot of initiatives we do. Even though I've not been able to do all of it, I feel a lot of my choices and how I've constructed the culture of the brand has been influenced by, what she has done as well. So yeah, please have a look if any of you would like to. It's an interesting story to read. She's no more now, but she's done some phenomenal work, Anita Roddick. Yeah.
So Shikha, How's This has had both remarkable offline and online presence, and just coming right to it, tell us a little bit about how you navigate both these channels and what are some of the key differences there.
So I had a very interesting journey. See, I started when there was no digital retail, right? I think now it's very hard for any of us to imagine that, there was a time when Instagram nahi tha, or, Facebook was not there, or, we couldn't sell, through a website. It wasn't like that when I started. I mean, not that it's that much time, but India has changed, right? So right. I have really seen the business in the offline format, and then I've seen the digital. And for us, definitely digital has been a huge sort of boon, and we managed to, I think, crack the code through digital itself. First of all, I would, at the beginning, like to say they have two very different channels, right? So as a startup entrepreneur, if you're just starting, my wholehearted suggestion would be is to start with one channel. Yes, online would be a good bet depending on the product you're selling, unless touch and feel is required, because it is definitely a slightly lower investment channel, right? Not that performance marketing, etc., are not cost, but of course, setting up a website compared to setting up real estate in India, they're two very different ball games. So my experience has been is that online is, in that sense, more easier to start up with because it's lower investment. It's a great way to be able to have a very focused approach to reach your customer, which is great. You can really target the right audience. And I think in that sense, there is greater scope for experimentation. You can work with low product quantity. categories, you learn a lot from it, which in offline is very different, right? Offline is a higher investment space. I mean, whether it's your store or even if you're supplying to large stores, both formats, the credit period sometimes are longer because there is a gestation period that happens. So I think based on the amount of capital you have, it's good to possibly start online. There's no ground rule. And then probably offline can become a picture in the space a little later after you start with, because I find offline a slightly more resource intensive model compared to what online is. But having said that, for some categories it's an absolute essential also. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's a good way to start with one and then probably move to the next.
So can you share a little bit more about how your brand strategy changed, if it did at
Sure.
all, and how you kept it consistent, across the channels?
See, I think we're very clear as a brand who we are, right? We offer, and that's what I would encourage all entrepreneurs to have, a very clear thought process as to who you are, because every channel will demand you to adapt. They will say, "Aap ye packaging badal do, aap ye kar lo." That is the nature of business, because everybody is looking to fashion their own business, especially when you're offering to retailers, because they tend to be quite sure about how they want the product to be placed in the store. But I mean, we have made adaptations. You have to be flexible, especially if you're operating in multi-channels. An omni-channel approach does require adaptation of product. But having said that, when it comes to packaging, when it comes to the brand identity, when it comes to the way we communicate, the tone of voice that we use, what is the language we're using with the consumer, all of that is constant, right? What you see on social media versus what you will get when the product comes home, it doesn't look visually like it's from two different brands, and it is
Right.
very difficult to do that often. But having said that, if you're very clear as to, which is why I would encourage people, understand what you're trying to solve for the customer, how you're trying to solve it, and then visually um, or from a tactical point, how you're taking to the customer, and please stick to it. Because if your brand is speaking one language on social media, but you're saying I'm an eco-friendly brand, but let's say your packaging comes in layers and layers of plastic, clearly you're not getting the right messaging across. So the brand
Right.
promise has to shine through. So I think it just requires adaptation to the extent that your brand promise is never getting impacted. It's a hard answer, because it depends, of course, based on brand to brand. But I think we've been fairly successful at it, because we've held back. We know where we can adapt. So I'll give you a very small example. Like, we faced a lot of resistance from offline retailers when we launched our packaging in the first year, because they said, "Aapne PVC nahi dala hai. Aapne How will we see the product?" And we said, "ठीक है, हम PVC भी करेंगे, but we'll make it a reusable PVC, right? Because we believe in the fact that resources can't be just. We don't want to use a PVC जो बस खोल के फट जाएगा and it'll be thrown away, right? That's not the brand ethos we have. So what we did is we made changes to the PVC that it could be reused, right? Somebody could use it as a storage box, and they could use it. So simple things like this. So there are ways out of it. And we kept the retailer happy, and we stuck to our brand identity. And it may seem a very small battle, but actually it became a huge issue. They were refusing to keep the product in the stores. So these are simple, small business issues that come up, and the brand ethos has to be kept in mind.
In terms of just strategies you've used for acquisition, what has been most effective? If you can talk a little bit more on that.
Sure. See, again, there are two parts to the way we approach sort of customer acquisition. One is, of course, short term and more tactical. So it is, okay, today I am wanting to do X amount of revenue online, or I'm trying to grow my X amount of dealers offline. I want to target, how do I acquire them, right? And of course the strategy will vary if it's B2B or B2C. But few things are, and then there is a second part, which is brand building, which is a long term play. So what we
Right.
do is, under the tactical part in offline, having, let's say, promoters are what salespeople on the floor, right? Because they're a great way of interacting with the customer. They're feet on street, right? Like in FMCG, you have people who go from store to store. So we have, sales teams on the ground, and whereas they're technically sales, but they are your route to reaching the customer, right? Dealer incentives, making sure that your dealers and distributors are constantly, it's not beyond the margins you're offering them. How are you constantly keeping them motivated, and so that they push your product out to the market? Then things like, of course, events, a great way to acquire the customer, right? Again, not very cost, I mean, it is fairly cost effective, just doing pop-ups, understanding, okay, and then you get direct customer feedback. Okay, this is looking good, this quality may be improved. It's a wonderful way of getting your first customers, and then taking it from there, right? Online, of course, strategies, a lot of people who are in digital marketing would be aware, they're fairly straightforward. So it's performance marketing, or looking at, of course, organic, ads that we plug in, etc. And that's the more tactical, which is the more sales driven, acquiring customers. There's the second part, which is, building loyalty, building engagement, which is through a lot of influencer partnerships online. Um, through a lot of brand building efforts, through PR. I would encourage entrepreneurs that little bit of brand building effort karna chahiye. We should not ignore that. We tend to get very tactical. But if we're really building the brand for the long term, then doing some degree of apportionment of brand building every year is a good way to make sure that your brand is getting recognized and equity is getting built.
We hear a lot about pricing strategies in the D2C space, especially when you're looking at cracking those sort of online marketplaces. And I think you mentioned a little bit about pricing, but I want to dig a little deeper into sort of what were the there are brands that go with the flat discounted approach. They go with different approaches on online marketplaces. What sort of worked for you, and what was your pricing approach when you first went online?
See, I find this question very interesting because I remember when pure play retail started, there used to be just two types when sales used to happen. One was during July, and then one was December, when it was called EOSS, which is end of season sale. Of course, now the industry is completely different, primarily driven by what happens online. There are offers happening all the time. It's Mother's Day, Women's Day. Platforms are constantly pushing discounts. It's very challenging, right? Because especially as a brand who truly wants to be built on good product, the right offering and the right assortment that we want to offer and the right positioning, right? How do we tackle it? Is that we have so first of all, as far as possible, I won't say it's always possible because some platforms do constantly bombard discounts. They'll put a coupon, they'll put something, but we have an umbrella promotion strategy that we follow. So all our platforms, they may say, okay, we're running some event, we're running this. Even if we run it, we have an overarching pricing strategy that runs throughout this. So we'll say, okay, on these SKUs, we will run a 10%, which will be available on all platforms, right? Now, there's a small burst where somebody is doing a very sharp home festival or something. We will participate, because the challenge is if you don't participate, you lose out. They'll say, us brand ne hame itna business diya, you have not given us any business. It is a challenge. But then we do it for very short bursts. So at the most 3 days or at the most 4 days. So that overall today, if you go to the brand, you will see that same, let's say, cushion cover at 10% on X marketplace on Y. But yes, truth be told, you can't be left behind. And those periods when top line is being pushed, you have to participate in offers and events. But we're very clear that the rest of the time, we're maintaining one singular strategy. I hope that made sense, but that's the only way to tackle. That's the way we figured out, right? Because you can put anything in your agreement. The fact of the matter is, when somebody wants to put a coupon on that, they're not going to ask you. They're just going to put it, right? And unless, of course, you're let's say a more established player, which is, they were, even with them, I have seen these challenges, right? You see a very large brands also having varying discounts. But this is how we tackled it, Indira. Yeah.
In your industry, how has sourcing evolved over time? And how can sourcing play a role in profitability?
See, India, in that sense, in our category, I think has always had great supply. In the sense, a great manufacturing base for home products, right, or fashion or lifestyle. I think we are the sourcing base for so many of those large retailers, right? Sorry, to answer your question, I think we've always had the manufacturing capability. Challenge was we didn't have the market to use it, right? Now, what I have seen, interestingly enough, is that when I started, I used to go to a lot of, vendors or partners, and I would say, make 10 units for me or make 15 units. And nobody was willing to give you a look because they'd be like, how can we just make 15 pieces for you, right? And of course, as people have seen the power of demand in domestic retail, now there is larger quantities that we go back with. And I feel that even actually, in general, there is a great ecosystem that has developed, which understands how how the industry works. So to give a small example, when I used to go to vendor partners earlier, they would say, you give us 100 pieces or let's not even talk about it, right? But I feel now, because people have understood that there is a model of online with certain challenges, now I have very collaborative discussions with my suppliers, right? They'll say, okay, yes, you start with X amount, we'll work it out. So I feel that the market, even in India, which was used to that, the way of exporting abroad, which is, large quantities, there is a certain section, though not all of it, because sometimes you have to have economies of scale, which is, able to supply you. And that's where you're getting the great quality products. So I think the sourcing side has definitely evolved. It's still a way to go. And of course, the challenge is that the moment you are able to source, your GM can go from 5%, and 5% is a lot for any business, right? So I think for us, our gross margins, when we started, A, because of lower quantities, but also because of the fact that we had such limited partnerships that we could do, now is almost 10%, 15% more, which has been great for the business, clearly.
The market competition, like online, especially in online marketplace, there is so much competition. So how do deal with that, not only from a pricing perspective, but also from sort of staying relevant? If you can share more insights on that.
We're talking again, I mean, I will speak for my category, but I know that maybe the challenge in others, see, home is very commoditized, right? There is a bed sheet you'll find for 400 rupees to now we're at our bed sheet ASP is around 1800, 2000. So question is, how do you justify to the consumer, right? That you are you that you're charging the 2000 because you're really remarkably better than somebody, and online nobody can understand that, right? Which is where offline plays a role. I feel that there it is easier to convince the customer, because you can, and that's where the promoter comes in. He can say, "Okay, you're saying this is for 800, but look at us and we're for 18." I think online it tends to become more challenging. I think just finding the right categories to operate has been helpful. So I'll give you a small example. Now, a category like bedsheet and home is very populated. There are thousands of people. We still operate there, but we're very clear that we will operate only in these particular segments in that category, right? Because we know those are white spaces, there people are not operating, and that's also matches what we want to do, right? We will not play the 400 price point. We cannot play the 600 because that's not who we are, and we don't have the capability to do it. I made that mistake. At one point, I started chasing that, and that's really when it hit me. I said, "What am I doing? This is not the business I want to do." Right. So I think it's not easy at all. But then, if you stay true to who you are, I truly believe, and you are reaching the audience, there is a customer who will pay you for. And when they buy you once and they experience it, there is a customer who will come back to you. I have seen it in the business. So I think I don't get phased now when I see this crazy discounting happening, because I feel if I'm operating in the right place, I'm reaching my customer, which is all that matters to me. I mean, all I'll say is, I'd rather be a brand that means something to somebody than be a brand that is nothing to anybody. Because if I just discount my product, I'm not creating the positioning that I want to, right? Or I'm diluting it, so as to say. Yeah.
What marketplaces have you found to be most effective for your brand, and why?
After working, so we presently operate at about 30 marketplaces, right? And let me tell you that our 70% business comes from literally just 6 or 7 of them, truth be told. And I think it would be a common experience across many brands. The thing is that obviously when you start, you'll have to test and try, because you have to understand. But here's how I see the whole marketplace hierarchy. So you have your horizontal players, like you have your Amazon, Flipkart, maybe possibly, I mean, Ajio too, but you can think of Amazon, Flipkart, who are offering all categories, huge number of assortment. That's your one layer. Your second layer is like your Myntra, or maybe I would say that's really Ajio, Tata Click, who are really operating like a department store in a way. Think of them your department store online, right? Like what Shoppers Stop is. And the third level is their very curated platforms, like Jaipur is there, or then you'll have a First Cry, which is only doing kids, right? For us, Vandana, actually the second and third have done better, right? I'm not saying we're not present on Amazon. And I think in Amazon, if you have to crack it, then you have to find one category or one place that you really go after. If you try and operate in multiple categories there, you will get decimated, because there is too much noise, to use Indira's word. There are too many people, and you will not find a niche. So for us to answer, the second and third have worked, which is more the Mintras of the world, and then more niche marketplaces, because we're a more premium brand, very logically, and we're a brand built on stories, built on product quality. So we feel that in Amazon and all that gets lost. But is there business to be done on Amazon? Absolutely. I would say if you operate in one particular vertical, one category, and really go long, do your advertising, be very focused in your pricing, you can win the game there as well. I mean, that's the way I've seen it.
What's next for House This? What do you have planned in the coming future? So if you can share a little bit more on that.
As a vision, there are two parts to it. One, I've always wanted to create a brand that is from India for the world, right? I think we're in that journey. We need more time for it, but we're on it. And I want, because I used to think, why do we have all these amazing products here which never reach our audience and are not created using our lifestyle for the world, right? So that's my first part. That's my overarching vision. And through that, I want to take all these beautiful stories that we have in India, right? Whether it is not just craft, but just, great, with so much culture, so much community, so many communities to celebrate. That's really my overall vision. Very specifically though, I think we have found great PMF in India. We're reaching the right audience. I think we want to now focus, double down on our D2C business. That's what we're focusing on. We started marketplace because the ecosystem started marketplace, so we did it. I think that's one key area for us. We do want to look at now finally putting that foothold internationally, but I think we're a few maybe months or years away, at a year at most away. That's the next step. And yeah, I think there's still a lot of product and a lot of it's amazing to see how much demand and how much interest is coming from the consumer now in home, especially post COVID, right? So I think there are
Right.
great products to be created, great aspirations to be fulfilled, and we're hoping that we can be the brand of choice there, so as to say.
What are you looking at in terms of sort of financing your business, moving forward, to sort of take that plunge in going international and in experimenting with the product further? What are your plans for that, Shikha, if you have any, and if you want to share?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm still very open to now, based on, where we are today, still explore more, whether it is looking at maybe venture debt or looking at debt per se. I'm not unafraid of exploring that. And the only thing is, and I'm actually, and I did mention earlier in the session, we are looking at possibly now, going to, the angel route, or through maybe a more consumer focused investor. But I'm just going to say this because this is what my journey has been. I'm now going to them because I'm not only looking at capital, I'm looking at expertise, right? I want somebody who can be a partner for me in the business, who can say, okay, you've created this brand, it's at X level, this is your revenues, this is your canvas. Now, what do you want to make with it? And if I tell them this is what I want to make and they love the idea, they should be partners with me in the business, right? And venture funds are not, in my view, only supposed to put in money. They are also supposed to be strategic partners to your business. So I'm looking at the right partner, but till I don't find the right person, I am going to grow it step on step through internal funds, through looking at working capital arrangements to boost the numbers. And then if I find the right person who believes in my idea and I believe in them, I think it would be a good option for me to now consider. I think I'm happy to push the pedal, so this may be the good time for me to consider that.
My question to you is that when you started out and you had a vision before you and you're shaping up and you know where you want to go, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of patience. So what's that one thing that you kept telling yourself and motivating your team and keeping yourself motivated, or whether it's finance or it's planning the business and taking it ahead?
It's Sushmita, I have to say and I truly mean it. It's a very, I'm glad you've come to the softer side of it and asked me a question on that count, because whatever I feel I've discussed in the session, after a point will be applicable for some of us here, not applicable, because everybody's journey is different. I think that's what I used to keep telling myself. You're absolutely right, especially when you start off, you say, in 5 years I would have cracked it, I would have figured it out, right? And of course that's, you'd love to do that, but the truth is most businesses take time, especially consumer businesses, because there's a learning period. There's, are you too early, are you too late? Like, I think I was truly too early in the beginning when I launched, right? Which is why I faced initial roadblocks. So I think the biggest thing I tell myself is that I don't need to emulate anybody's journey. If today X brand is here or Y is here, it after a point should just be blocked out. My journey is what only I know of it, why I took a certain decision. And let's understand, we tend to talk about business or anything we do in life is only that, but we're also people, right? We have personal journeys that we go through. So I feel that how am I evolving to as a whole as a person is also very important for me, right? Not just what I do in business. I'm a person of a complete person. But the biggest thing I tell myself is that please don't, look at external things. Your journey is truly yours and you will reach where you need to at the time you do. And I, like in reference to what Indira said, I'm very sort of, I stay the course. I'm like, if I'm not going to get pressured into changing what I'm trying to create, if I have belief in the vision, I will go after it. Okay, thoda aur time lagega, I'm okay with it. But it is my journey and I need to be very proud. Having said that, Sushmita, last note, it's not been easy, huh? I've had a big mental challenge coming to this kind of mindset. It's not easy when you see things going here and you seemingly think someone's better than you. But, I think what I've learned has been so phenomenal. And that's also life, right? You need to keep learning. It's not just where you reach, it's also what you go through to get there.
Can you share some strategies for managing inventory and fulfillment when selling on multiple marketplaces?
One thing is, so I'll tell you, I would tend to think an asset light or an inventory light model is a good solution, especially when you're starting off and you don't know what works and doesn't work. So creating low MOQs and production allows, you may have to compromise a bit on margins, but you can do that. Number one is that. Number two is, I think using an ERP is very super important. I think having the right tech interface to be able to manage, because inventory management is a task, especially in a brand like ours where we have 800 SKUs, right? Unless you're a FMCG brand with 5 SKUs, even then you need the tech. It's not a strategy, but I'm just saying, putting it out there that, that cost makes sense if one invests in the right sort of, whether it's unicommerce, anywhere one can explore. Thirdly is that, make sure your best sellers are never out of stock, because that happens, and, you can actually be losing in revenue day on day, right? So quickly identify what are those products that need to be in stock all the time, so that part of your bread and butter business is constantly taken away, right? And, makes sense to develop a little bit of expertise in quicker delivery, because people now are becoming very, very conscious that they need products in 2 days, 3 days. So investing in the right kind of supply chain to be able to service, or the kind of production capability to service orders faster, makes the difference, right? So speed is as much a part of the proposition online as is the quality of the product. So investing any kind of tool for that makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are few tactical things.
It's been a pleasure, hosting you, chatting with you, and hearing more about your, sort of journey as a business founder. And of course, wishing you all the luck in your future endeavors with House This. And we hope to see you more, on Mahila Money as well.